Hello, everybody. Tim Hughes here. I'm the CEO and co-founder of DLA Ignite. I'm here today with Lydia Michael, and we're going to be talking about her book, Brand Love, Building Strong Consumer-Based Connections, which is published by Kogan Page. Lydia, just to say, and I always do a kind of little praise seed whenever I review books, and I really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Your enthusiasm and your knowledge really comes out. So branding is not, so I'm a salesperson. So don't hold that against me. But branding isn't something that I went to college and learned about. So, I learned about it through books like yours. And it was really great. I learned loads.
Yeah, I'm happy to hear that. I'm happy to talk to you about it too.
Good. So before we dig in, where can people find you?
So people can connect with me, of course, all over social media. LinkedIn, Instagram is where I'm active the most. And of course, our websites, lydiamichael.com, and then the company site is blendedcollective.com.
Excellent. Thank you. And the book is very... I'm glad you said that you were most active on Instagram, because the book is probably more business to consumer than business to business, isn't it?
You know what? It actually, I'm probably more active on LinkedIn than Instagram, to be honest. But even though the book focuses very heavily on B2C, I do address B2B in the beginning of the book.
You do. And
Yeah.
but I mean, from I have a B2B background, and it kind of felt more B2C.
Yeah, it definitely does. The majority of it is B2C. But I've had people in the past ask me about this topic specifically every time I speak about it. And they're curious how and if it applies to the B2B space. And I always like to say that when we deal with B2B, at the end of the day, the person that's behind that business, there's still somebody that's making a decision, right? And there's still somebody that you have to connect with, whether it's B2C or B2B. So I like to say that when we talk B2B, you still need to think human to human, right?
You do. And I think that I think all of us, in the way that we buy things when we're buying B2C, what happens is that gradually over time that becomes B2B, because we all turn up to work and we all do things like we do in our normal lives.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, we don't buy a BMW like we buy a pair of shoes.
Sure.
But ultimately, if we, the way that we buy a BMW is that we, quite often, even now with pairs of shoes, we can go on and we can be searching for the type of shoes that we want.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think with bigger purchases like that, the emotion is a little bit more controlled, right? I mean, if I go and buy a pair of shoes for $100, if I don't like them next week, it's not the end of the world. If I go and pay $80,000 for a car, that's a slightly different story. So I think emotion really comes in different waves depending on how large the purchase is, for sure. But yeah, I know we're going to get into that emotional purchase.
Yeah. I'm just going to bring this up because I know this is because the book. So the people to know, the book is called Brand Love, right? And on page 16, when we get into that, what Lydia has done is that she's produced this diagram. I've got to do it. I have my camera on backwards, so I need to get my. So we have this diagram, which is Lydia's basically view for getting brand love. So we move up from awareness, familiarity, interest, likeliness, trust, attachment, love, loyalty, and then brand love. So a lot of what we're going to talk about actually hinges on some of that, and we're going to talk about that. Gary, before I'm going to move on to Gary, says you made a great point, Lydia. Thanks, Gary.
Thanks, Gary.
So in the book, you talk about, and I've done this myself. I do this a lot. You buy on emotion and then justify with logic.
Yeah.
What do you think is I do that? What do you think? Is that something that we all do, or?
I think it happens a lot more than we think. And a lot of times we're not even aware of it in the moment, right? Emotional purchases or just being an impulsive buyer in the moment.
Yeah.
I think a lot of times the regrets come in after the fact.
Well, when the credit card bill comes in.
Maybe there aren't any. But I think what happens a lot of times, and I'll give you an example of maybe an iPhone that people buy, right? There's this emotional association and connection sort of that's tied to innovation and exclusivity. That a lot of times we spent the money and then we come back and we justify it with logic regarding some of the rational factors. So, for instance, oh, but this is a really good quality phone and the functionality is really top, and that's why it was worth $1,000, right? And so I think similarly, the purchase of luxury brands a lot of times stems from emotional resonance. Sometimes it's related to prestige or recognition or this awareness or image that we're trying to create, that later we justify with perhaps, oh, but this purse is an investment, right? Because I can sell it and I can get my money back, or I can sell it and I can make more money. Or perhaps it's just as simple as the craftsmanship is really, really good. And that's why I bought the $1,000 purse.
I'm looking really great down walking the street with a Louis Vuitton bag.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. I mean, there's so much that goes into why people buy those things. And I touch on that specific example too in the book, where sometimes, of course, it's the recognition, it's we want to be associated with specific values that the brand represents. And a lot of those luxury brands do a really good job in marketing and communicating their values, right? And so why does somebody drive a Mercedes versus an Audi or a BMW, right? I mean, they're all luxury cars, but in some ways, each one of these cars speaks to them based on who they are or who they want to be.
Absolutely, because they, in most cases, they'll say that they're the best car in the world, and Audi, Mercedes, and BMW say that. So how do you choose?
Exactly.
And that's a lot of that is down on emotion. We're seeing an increase in the use of AI. And what do you see happening with brands in terms of so we have emotional connection. We're going to buy the BMW, but where does AI fit in this? Because at the end of the day, if that's emotion, AI doesn't have emotion. So what strategies do you recommend for brands to stay human in this automated world?
And I love that you just said AI doesn't have emotions. And I wish a lot more people would recognize this, because I was experimenting with AI a month back or so, and I was putting in different prompts because I was curious to see what I would get back.
Yeah.
And I said something where I don't remember the question, but I said something where I required AI to use emotion or this human element. And I remember screenshotting the answer, and it said, "I'm sorry, I can't answer this because I don't have emotion." And I have yet to make a social post about this. It's been on my list, but I like this example because I think AI has stirred up a lot of emotions, especially in the marketing world, where a lot of people are fearing for what could happen to their role or their job in the marketing world. And I think we should look at it as a way to enhance our work that we are doing and allow us to do more strategic focused work. And so what that means is it's not really going to replace us. It's actually going to show us why and how we need to be more human and more emotional in the work that we are doing as brand marketers, business owners, anywhere in this space. So understand how AI can aid your work and not really replace it. How can it help you, look for maybe quick responses, or if you're, in the ideation stage, you can get some really good ideas. But then you have to ensure that all of your interactions in the marketing space are human led. They're not going to be replaced by a machine. They're human led. Your interaction with people are going to be human to human. And that's really what fosters that genuine and that authentic connection, which I truly don't believe that AI can replace. As close as it can get, I think there's still something that we bring to the table that doesn't exist in that space.
I think that quite often with AI, people are expecting it to give an answer. And actually, it doesn't give an answer. It works alongside you in the way that it works. But I mean, if you take Chat GPT, it tries to please you, but it actually doesn't give you the answer.
And you should never take that answer if,
And
if it gives you
no,
that
because
answer.
it could be wrong.
Yeah.
We did a podcast just 2 hours ago, and I asked ChatGPT to write 5 questions based on the person's website. And the person's website, anyway, the questions it came back with were all to do with agriculture and farming, and that's nothing to do with what the organization did.
Oh, wow.
So all the questions were wrong.
Yeah.
So it's just a great example of how AI is there to enhance.
Mhm.
In the book, you explain 8 stages of brand love. Do you want to walk us through this?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So I talk, and I think that was the model that you actually just
It
shared.
is.
It's a little difficult to see
It
there on the screen for people, but certainly I have it in front of me too here.
They need
But
to buy the book, don't they, Lydia, to get a good copy?
yes, please do. It's available anywhere you can find books. But yet to talk about the 8 stages of brand love, I noticed this pattern over the years of me working in marketing and working with companies and brands. And it sort of is this evolving journey, this customer journey that leads to brand love, which a lot of times is equivalent. That's really brand loyalty, right? So when people hear brand love, they're like, well, what does this mean? I've heard people say, well, this is such a fluffy term. Why brand love? But it's a concept and strategy in marketing. And so who doesn't want to reach brand loyalty when they connect with their customers, right? And so when we look at these 8 stages, I've split them up into 3 parts. The first 3 to 4 parts really focus around the element of brand desire. If we don't, at the very foundation of building brands and growing brands, have a brand desire where people truly desire what we have to offer, then it's really difficult to start that journey. And so I talk about the first few stages as awareness, familiarity, interest, and likeness. And I think that that's very self-explanatory, right? Awareness, if we don't know that a brand exists, I mean, there's nothing that we can even do. We can't take
Yep.
action. We want to be familiar with what the brand has to offer.
Yep.
And there needs to be a level of interest. I need to somehow be intrigued by the product or the service. And of course, then I have to like it. And I go into a lot more detail in the book about what each of these stages entail and how you can really focus on building those out. But again, the first few stages are really focused around that element of brand desire. We then go on to trust, and that's stage 5 in that model. And trust is really interesting because it's a turning point in the relationship between a brand and a customer. And throughout the book, I explain a lot of the brand customer relationships to person relationships in our personal lives, because I think that a lot of elements that we see in whether it's with a friend or a family member or relationship, a lot of those feelings that we have, we actually mirror a lot of that in our brand customer journey.
Yep.
And so trust is important because you spend all of this time, same in your personal and business life, to build up to this level of trust, right? Because that's where consumer behavior changes. Once somebody trusts you, you can go really far in that relationship. But the thing is too, interestingly enough, when you break that trust, when something goes wrong, it takes seconds for that trust to be broken and perhaps to never come back again and not be rebuilt. And so I think that that's a really, really, really important part. And that's also where the element of self-identification begins. It's sort of where we like a brand, where we trust a brand, and we start to become attached to it. And a lot of that happens is because we, on some level, whether it's consciously or not, we develop or we see our values within that brand. And that's why a lot of brands that we support and that we stand by and that we're loyal to, even if they're more expensive perhaps, is because they in some way represent who we are, who we want to be, what we want to be, right? I mean, I have a friend who's vegan and who's very conscious of the food she puts into her body, the cosmetics she uses, right? A lot of that, I've become more like that over the years too. But we then use specific brands to support that lifestyle, right? And so I don't care if I can save $2 or $3 buying another product, because this is the product that I believe in, and I believe that this brand is going to support my healthy lifestyle, right? And so that is really, really important, is that element of self-identification. And then the rest of the stages are really focused around attachment, love, loyalty, and advocacy, where we really focus on that brand intimacy. The intimacy that we experience with this brand, because we trust it, we're attached to it, we support it. And so there's this intimacy that happens, similar to, personal relationships, that I think are very hard to be replaced by another brand. So overall, each stage really deepens the customer's relationship with that brand.
So, I mean, I think it's great that the steps, and I agree with you, the fact that you've got trust at number 5, because quite often people seem to think that trust is built really, really quickly. But you've actually got these 2 areas of brand desire and brand intimacy. What understanding do you have about emotional triggers behind the consumer decisions to actually start liking or trusting brands?
Yeah, so you call them emotional triggers. I refer to them, and this is a similar concept in the book, in association with the brand love model, as brand love drivers is what I call them. So the brand love drivers, I've put together a list of 10 rational and 10 emotional drivers based on sort of how our brain works, right? You've heard people say, "Oh, are you a right brainer or a left brainer?" Right? Which essentially means, are you more geared to the emotional side of thinking, the creative, or more the logical and the rational? And so based on that concept, I created these brand love drivers, 10 rational, 10 emotional. Not to say that there's only 10 of each. I know there's more, but for the sake of the 200-page limit that I have here for the book, I really focused on the ones where I see the most drive and sort of interest on the consumer side. So I talk about belonging a lot, belonging, authenticity, humanization. Those are all elements, purpose and sustainability. They're all elements that really drive and trigger, as you say, the connection to brands, right? And so belonging, for instance, is one where the focus on community becomes really, really important. And a lot of brands over the years have started to figure out ways of how they can center their brand around community. And you see that, and I mentioned that in the book too, you see that a lot with streetwear, clothing brands, fashion brands, where it's all about the community and bringing people together and, sort of supporting like-minded individuals that, think and do the same. But you see it with a lot of other companies too, who perhaps don't focus on community, but maybe social awareness, right? I like to cite Patagonia. I think this is a classic.
I was going to say Patagonia. Yeah.
And we've talked about.
I've actually got a Patagonia shirt on.
Yeah. And we've talked about this before, you and I, about Patagonia, because I think they're a classic example in marketing, that I also reference in the book. Or a company like Ben & Jerry's. It doesn't matter if you believe in their idea or not, but Ben & Jerry's has positioned themselves to really be more than just an ice cream brand. And similar to Patagonia, it's more than just outdoor apparel. Those brands are very much focused around the idea of purpose and sustainability, but also supporting greater good. So giving back to the environment, making sure that a company like Patagonia is very conscious of the materials that they use, which a lot of times justifies the price point, but they believe in protecting the environment and protecting our materials and protecting nature. They give back. I think it's 1% of sales that goes back into efforts and organizations that they believe in. And so somebody who's buying a Patagonia shirt is not just buying a Patagonia shirt and spending double or triple the amount of money. They're doing so likely because they support that mission, right? That mission base, I think, is also a lot of times what triggers that support and that connection with certain brands over others.
Yeah, I bought this Patagonia shirt actually because British Airways lost my luggage, so I got it for free. But I went in. We flew to Denver, and they lost the luggage, and I was able to buy £1,000 worth of stuff. But having bought a Patagonia shirt, I probably wouldn't go back to buying anything else because they are so last longer than, you know, it costs more, but it lasts longer. And
Well, that's the idea.
And there's all the other brand stuff as well. So
yeah, and they have a whole DIY section on their website where they teach you how you can keep your items for much longer, you know, whether it's repairing, sending it back to them. And I think that that's just another level of trust that is developed in that brand, because you see that they're confident in the product that they're producing by putting that guarantee on it, right?
yeah,
That warranty, really, essentially.
yeah. Gary said, brand love drivers. I appreciate the effort to utilize drive compared to trigger, much more subtle yet inclusive.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.
For that feedback.
Lydia, sorry, the 20 minutes is up.
Yeah.
It goes so quickly.
Yeah.
And thank you so much for coming on and sharing your thoughts and about the book. For those that may have missed it, Lydia's book is Brand Love: Building Strong Consumer Brand Connections, which I'm assuming you can get on Amazon worldwide.
Amazon worldwide. It also is available anywhere else you can find books. So yeah, grab a copy.
So where can people find you?
LydiaMichael.com is my personal site. So all things speaking, workshops, everything that I do, you can find me there. And then our company work is at blendedcollective.com. And feel free to connect with me on social media, obviously LinkedIn, where we're streaming right now, and then also Instagram.
Lydia, thank you so much for coming on and talking about your book. It's a fantastic book. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me, Tim.
And thank you so much for sharing your expertise today. It's been awesome.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Gary, for joining in as well.
Yeah. Thanks so much.
Thanks.